Remember how I said the last episode was kind of okay? Well, it was fun while it lasted. Back when the trailer for the second season came out, I said that The Rings of Power is the worst fanfiction ever, and boy did this episode prove me right. It's like someone said, let's ruin every character, and then the one rational person working at Amazon was like,
What do you mean everyone?
Everyone!
Almost nothing in this episode is from the books. They're blatantly copying scenes from Game of Thrones, but worse, damn near none of this stuff is set up. This is exactly what happened in the first season, and at the same point in the season. They want to have these moments of gravitas and emotion, but they never took the time to build up to them, so the moments fall flat. And I feel bad for the actors because they're really trying. If you watch the episode, you know what scene I'm talking about. But the showrunners and writers did them no favors. They've got nothing to work with. Take the scenes with the hobbits. Nori realizes that she's put the stores at risk because the Dark Wizard is looking for her. Nori tells the leader that her people should leave, but the stores don't want to leave their home, so Nori decides to turn herself in. The show tries to make a big deal of the importance of the store's home, but this is literally the second time we've seen them, and the third time we've had any moments with the leader, whose name I'm never gonna remember. The actress is doing her best to sell the dialogue, but the scene has no weight because we don't know anything about these people. This is like showing a random scene from Seven Samurai of the villagers crying. Their performances are fine, but the audience won't care because they have no connection to these people. You need the scenes of the villagers being helpless and afraid, and then being selfish and shady for the crying scenes to work. It's all about context. Speaking of which, Poppy and Merrimack randomly fall in love. Don't be alarmed, that was just the sound of thousands of lesbians crying out at once. They were certain, absolutely sure Nori and Poppy were a thing, but now that's gone. I'm sure they'll get over it. That said, this is a little fast. These two literally just met, and bruh isn't exactly running on all cylinders. Then again, Poppy ain't that bright herself. I bet no one will have a problem with how fast these two fell in love, even though it makes no sense. But if Mr. Nobody had been a woman, well, we'd never hear the end of it. At any rate, because of this, Poppy convinces Nori to stay and fight. Sure, why not? I mean, it's not like we know nothing about the Dark Wizard, or his minions, or the stores, or what the hell is happening in Rune. Just act like this is a big moment. Fuck the context. Speaking of ignoring context, Discount Gandalf and Tom Bombadil ramble on about the secret fire. You might be wondering what that is, and since the show doesn't bother to explain it to the audience, allow me to blaxplain. The secret fire is the power of creation. It's what Iluvatar uses to create life, or more accurately, Fëanor, a spirit or a soul. This is what allows a creature to have sentience and free will. Other beings, like the Valar, can create other creatures, but those creatures are animated by their creator's will. They don't truly act on their own. Only Iluvatar can impart true sentience onto beings. He does this when Aule creates the dwarves and when Yavanna creates the Ents. This is also why the orcs are not thought to be created by Morgoth, but instead corrupted by him, because Morgoth can't create sentient life. So why is this in the show? Well, it's because Gandalf says in his fight with the Balrog that he's a servant of the secret fire. So again, the show implies that this is Gandalf while pretending it's not. The issue is that the scene makes no sense in context to the lore, or even the show's jacked up narrative. We've never heard anything about this secret fire, and the show has Bombadil speak about it in such a vague way that it's impossible to understand what he's getting at. That's bad for the audience, but it's worse for Discount Gandalf because he keeps asking for help and old Tom keeps speaking in nonsensical riddles. It seems like the show is just going in circles with Discount Gandalf, and I think it's because the writers wrote themselves into a corner by having him not remember who he is or how to use his power. If they commit to him being Gandalf, then he would immediately have to deal with Sauron, which completely breaks the lore since the wizards don't arrive until the Third Age, after Sauron is defeated. So now the writers need some way to keep Discount Gandalf in the East, so they're dragging this out, but they're also trying to claim that Sauron's on the brink of rising to power, so it doesn't make any sense why Discount Gandalf would stay in the East. It's a total mess, one the showrunners needlessly created by changing the order of events. It's almost like Tolkien knew what he was doing. So then old Tom takes Discount Gandalf to the Keyblade graveyard to find his staff. This is how you solve the problem of him not going to stop Sauron? Have him spend weeks searching for a stick? Oh no, it's actually dumber than that. See, Discount Gandalf keeps getting visions of Nori in danger, so he wants to help her, but Bombadil keeps going on about Sauron, and Discount Gandalf is like, well, Nori will die. And so the show has Tom Bombadil completely butcher one of Gandalf's lines.
Many that die deserve life. Some that live deserve death. Who are you to give it to them?
The correct line is, many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them? Then do not be so eager to deal out death and judgment, for even the very wise cannot see all ends. The point wasn't to lecture someone about whose life is more important. Gandalf says this to Frodo to teach him that Gollum may yet serve a purpose, that even if Gollum can't be changed, it doesn't mean his actions can't lead to good outcomes. And that's what happens in the story. Because Bilbo didn't kill Gollum when he had the chance, Gollum was there at Mount Doom when Frodo succumbs to the ring, and he takes the ring from Frodo and, depending on how you want to read it, either accidentally falls or is deliberately pushed by Frodo into the lava with the ring, destroying the ring and winning the day. Had Bilbo killed Gollum like Frodo wanted, once Frodo fell to the ring, Sauron would have killed him, taken the ring, and overthrown the world. The point of Gandalf's words is that no one should go around killing people just because they think that person deserves it, because you don't know what part that person may play later on. It's a good line and great advice, so why would they butcher it and make it into the polar opposite of Tolkien's point? Now, ironically, many of the people who will complain about this line technically agree with Tom Bombadil, that some lives are more important than others, so it'll be interesting to see how they thread that needle without making themselves look like complete hypocrites. Anyway, Bombadil tells Discount Gandalf to choose and then ditches his ass, and that's the last we see of them in the episode. So we basically learned a whole lot of nothing. It begins and ends at the same place. This man is still looking for a fucking stick. Are you kidding me? No, they're not kidding. They're committing to the bit. For example, Celebrimbor is losing his mind over the rings. Literally, he's going bananas. He snaps at his staff, forgets Short Round's name, and is completely consumed with trying to make rings for men. It's kind of implied that Discount Jesus is messing with his mind, but none of this makes any sense in context to the show. Celebrimbor didn't have any problems creating rings for the elves or dwarves. The show claims that the rings for men need to be made so that the men won't easily fall prey to corruption, but the show never explains why men would be so easily corrupted, or why Celebrimbor is incapable of solving this problem. Worse, it doesn't make any sense why Celebrimbor needs to do this when in the previous episode Annatar said he'd make the rings himself. Remember, Annatar is Sauron, and Sauron is the greatest craftsman in Middle-earth at this time. He teaches Celebrimbor how to make rings of power, not the other way around, so there's no reason Annatar couldn't make rings for men on his own. This is just some nonsense the show contrived to add conflict, but it doesn't work because they didn't properly set it up. The show tries to make it as if Sauron himself is as manipulative and seductive as the One Ring, but it's so obvious what he's doing that it makes the characters look gullible and stupid to fall for it. No one has any reason to trust Annatar, especially when all their problems began when he showed up. Now, there is at least one person who knows something's up, and that's Durin. Apparently, the Elven Smiths ran out of Mithril, and a new shipment never arrived, so Discount Jesus goes to Khazad-dûm to ask for more, offering King Durin fresh timber for his mines. The king denies him, but it's just a ploy. He expects Annatar to come back due to the coming war, so now he can charge more for the trade. This is a ring talking, it's making him greedy. Durin tries to take the ring from his father but gets knocked away. The show doesn't explain this, but this is because the ring increases the bearer's natural powers, so the king is now stronger than the average dwarf. Durin is broken by his father's change. Jesus tries to get him to turn on his father, but he can't bring himself to do it. The scene wants to be heavy and important, and the actors are giving it their all, but we spend so little time with Durin and his father that the moment carries no weight at all. We're supposed to think it's tragic that the king is falling to the ring, but we don't know enough about him to see this as a tragedy. We have no connection to this man. I give the actors credit for their performances, but it would have been nice if the show gave them the screen time to earn the reaction they want. Anyway, the pair decide to stop Narvi from mining more Mithril by Disa singing to call down bats to chase the miners away. This is their great stand against the tyranny of the ring. Whatever. Now, back before Discount Jesus left Eregion, A body washed up with a message asking, "Where is he?" meaning, "Where is Sauron?" This is a message from Adar, who suspects that Halbrand is Sauron and is still in Eregion. He tells this to Strong Woman, who continues to prove she's the dumbest woman in the world. Although, to her credit, at first, she tries to act like a rational person. Anantar tries to get her to talk by sharing his feelings about Sauron. He mentions that Sauron preys on people's minds to find what they want most, and asks what Strong Woman wanted. To no one's surprise, it wasn't common sense, but instead an army. Adar says that what he wanted was children, which apparently explains the orcs, but that raised a question for me. Are these not regular orcs? I think I questioned this in the first season because they seem to be connected and loyal to Adar. We saw this in the first episode of this season when they stuck with Adar even though Sauron should be powerful enough to control them. Are these orcs specifically tied to Adar, or is this just how the orcs came into being? The show never bothers to explain this. Another problem is that the show just makes shit up. Case in point, the Crown of Morgoth. This is a crown from the first episode that Adar used to stab and not kill Sauron. Apparently, this is the same crown that bore the Silmarils, and that's interesting because the Valar turned that into a collar to chain Morgoth at the end of the first stage. So, did that not happen? Did Morgoth not get banished into the void? The best excuse I can see for this change is that this bit about the crown being turned into a collar isn't in the appendices, but the show clearly references and uses things from the rest of Tolkien's works, so that excuse doesn't fly. What makes even less sense is why Adar still has it. See, he thinks the crown should have been enough to kill Sauron, but it wasn't. Now he realizes that he needs the crown and the 3 elven rings to do it. Why would the crown be able to do this? Or the rings that only preserve? What's the plan? Use the rings to keep Sauron alive long enough to stab him to death? The crown has no power and the rings don't kill things, so what is his plan? And then, to make it worse, Strong Woman initially refuses to cooperate with Adar, but when he returns, she decides to work with him, so she tells Adar all about the elves' forces on their way to Eregion, and that Elrond is with them and has her ring. You just told your enemy your whole fucking plan and revealed your secret weapon. Is he even really on your side? You don't know. Why would you tell him your whole fucking plan? So of course, when Strong Woman says that they need to wait for the elves because Adar's single legion isn't enough, Adar reveals that he's got way more troops and soon he's gonna have a ring of power. This bitch is literally the dumbest woman in the world. She's supposed to be this cunning military strategist, and she just gave away the whole fucking plot. However, I will give her some credit. She realizes that Sauron's plan might be to use Adar's forces as his own, so getting Adar to attack Eregion might be a trap. Okay, fine, decent insight. Oh, but there's just one more thing. Sauron is supposed to be a great power, and the orcs are susceptible to strong wills, so all he'd actually need to do is just exert his will, and the orcs would be his. So technically, none of this should be happening. Sauron should have had the orcs on his side the moment he thought about them. But then again, I have done this really weird thing called reading the books, and you know nobody's supposed to do that. So the siege of Eregion happens, and the people fall into a total panic even though all of these elves probably survived the first age, so this wouldn't be their first battle. I'm not saying none of them would panic, but it is strange that damn near all of them lose their shit. They got me over here like Chucky. You act like you've never seen a catapult before. Meanwhile, Celebrimbor hears the commotion and tries to look, but Discount Jesus blocks him, and when Celebrimbor forces his way outside, Anantar traps him in a fake vision of Eregion to keep him from learning about the siege. Anantar talks about the importance of the rings to Celebrimbor's legacy, claiming that the Silmarils will just be a whisper compared to what Celebrimbor will achieve. Then he gives Celebrimbor mithril dust supposedly created by Narvi, which we never find out how the hell he got, and hands over Feanor's hammer. Now, the way the scene plays out makes it seem like the 9 rings for men are the most powerful or the most important rings Celebrimbor creates. That's the opposite of what happens in the books. The 3 elven rings are the height of Celebrimbor's prowess, and that makes sense because they were made last. This is a weird thing to reverse, but if I were being as generous as possible, then I could say that the show doesn't claim that the 9 are the greatest, but instead implies that Celebrimbor outdid himself with the original 3, and now can't live up to his own hype. Either way, it's total nonsense. It also begs the question of why Anatar is even there. He's really not doing anything with the rings. He's not teaching Celebrimbor new techniques. He's not making any of them. The elves are actually doing all the work. So what is he doing? The books made it clear that Anatar taught Celebrimbor how to make rings of power. The show just has Anatar there. He's pointless. Anyway, Celebrimbor goes back to make rings and then the assault happens. That's the end of the episode, but that's not all that happened in the episode. I saved the bit with Numenor for last because it is the worst fan fiction I have seen in a long time. I thought I was supposed to be watching the Rings of Power, not some half-assed version of Game of Thrones, but that is the best description of this nonsense in Numenor. So Elendil is brought before Pharazôn to renounce his crime of, I guess, punching Pharazôn's son, and to pledge his loyalty to Pharazôn as a true king. Elendil renounces his crime, but won't pledge fealty, so Pharazôn sentences Elendil to trial by the Valar. He will be put to the sea at the mercy of a sea monster who will either eat him, proving his guilt, or spare him, proving his innocence in the eyes of the Valar. None of this is in the books, but worse, it doesn't even make sense in the show. Like I've said many times in this video, the show never bothers to set any of this up. We know nothing about how the Númenóreans view the Valar or their traditions around them, so when the show mentions something like trial by sea monster, it comes out of nowhere. There's no context for any of it, from why Pharazôn would choose this method to why it's even a thing. The best the show offers is that Pharazôn is trying to throw the faithful's love of the Valar back in their faces by forcing Elendil to follow this archaic rule, but we know next to nothing about the faithful or Númenor's rules, so this falls flat. So they lock Elendil up in prison, and then his daughter comes to plead with him to pledge fealty to Pharazôn. Where in the Game of Thrones have I seen this before? Elendil obviously refuses to bend the knee, so his daughter brings in the blind queen to plead the case, but he still refuses because it would be against his beliefs as one of the faithful. The problem is that none of what they're talking about has even been in the show. For the umpteenth time, we have no context, so why should anyone care about the scene? Also, since when did Miriel and Elendil become a thing? Are they fucking? They better not be fucking, that's not in the books, that's way off from the books. Anyway, time comes for Elendil to die, and of course, the queen takes Elendil's place, and of course, she's spared by the monster. The people then chant for her as the Queen of the Sea, but Pharazôn's already been made king, so I'm not sure what this is supposed to accomplish. She's not actually the queen anymore, right? Or maybe not right, because the show never bothers to explain what the fuck is going on. That said, this is a cool shot. The Numenor scenes end with Pharazôn checking the Palantir and seeing Halbrand, and I gotta admit that as much as I think it'll be a shit show, I kinda want to see what they're gonna do with this, because in the books, Sauron tries to corrupt the Númenóreans after failing to corrupt the elves, but it backfires, and eventually Pharazôn comes after Sauron, but the Dark Lord doesn't have the power to defeat the Númenóreans, so instead he bends the knee, and eventually goes from prisoner to Pharazôn's advisor. I'm interested to see how the writers will handle this because they already made the Númenóreans hostile to war in Middle-earth, so none of these people would agree to Pharazôn going back there just to get Sauron. Again, this is another example of the show needlessly writing itself into a corner. Unfortunately for the show, there are only 2 episodes left, so they don't have enough time to fix any of this nonsense. It's almost like they should have stuck to the plot of the books instead of writing the worst fan fiction ever. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.